right. Good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing? Well, I just wanted to welcome everyone and thank you so much for joining us as we hear from Teresa Quinlan on becoming an independent thinker. We're so honored to have her today, all the way from Canada. I don't know if you were following along with our chats, but she is joining us from Canada. And apparently it's very cold today, so I'm so sorry. I'm your host, Teresa Quinlan, and I'll be working kind of quietly in the background during the presentation if you need anything. But at this time, I'm going to turn it over to one of our program advisory board members, Emily Elrod, so she can do the introductions for our amazing speaker today. Go ahead, Emily.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. I'm very excited to have one of my really good friends with me, Teresa, on today. What her company says, and I also totally believe it, it is IQ+EQ TQ. And if you see, her name's Teresa Quinlan. But she is such an amazing and dynamic person. If you also seen too that she did go run today in 2 degree, or was it negative 2 degree? It was freezing. Let's just say in the southern, it was way too cold. But today I'm excited for y'all to learn from her. She is very engaging and dynamic. And I know Teresa will say this as well, most likely, is that she's here to have a conversation. She's not one that just like gives information. It's a conversational. So I am blessed to introduce my good friend, Teresa.
Thanks, Emily. It's awesome to be here. It was great to get the invitation. It's been lovely to meet Shariah. So I'm really looking forward to engaging with everyone today in this hour. A few things that I would love to be able to do. I mean, we're a small, intimate group of 14, and so we could totally do some breakouts, but perhaps just engaging in dialogue with 14 people is also, I mean, if we were bigger, for sure. As a smaller group, I'll just watch the numbers to see if we do breakouts or we simply just stay here and have our conversation together here. I want to be able to challenge the status quo a little bit of what we think about when we think independent thinker. I want to be able to bring to our awareness the skills we need to flex in emotional intelligence that assist us with being a very effective independent thinker and what that actually means. I want to be able to have you self-assess what you think your skill set is like around independent thinking towards the beginning of our conversation, and then reassess towards the end to be able to determine if today gave you some things that you could work on, that you could put into play, put into practice, and really develop those kinds of skills. So something that I think would be really awesome is to just start initially with a discussion around what do we actually think independent thinking is. And there's a few questions. I'm popping them into the chat so you can also see them. But there's a few questions to consider when this concept of independent thinking comes to mind. And some of that is challenging the status quo, going against the flow, resisting groupthink. So we'll have to unmute in this part of the hour to be able to share when we have done these things, or when someone else has done these things, what have we noticed has been the experience? What have we noticed how other people respond to challenging of the status quo? How are people treated when they resist groupthink? What has your experience been like when you've decided to go against the flow? And having this conversation amongst us will really be able to sort of bring to the forefront experiences we've had related to independent thinking, so we can take a look at how we're doing it, because it's the how that is the emotional intelligence piece. And if we're not doing it well, if we're sassy, we're tactless, then usually our independent thinking is very negative and negatively interpreted and negatively experienced. If we're in emotions of fear and discomfort and we try to do our independent thinking, oftentimes we won't actually do it. We'll just go along with groupthink and we'll go along with the flow. And then we'll resent or beat ourselves up for not having spoken up when we had the chance. So unmute yourself and share, what have your experiences been like around independent thinking?
Okay, I'll go. So one of the things that I say that I've done with independent, it gives me a thought process of one time I was it was in a boardroom and of all the HRs, and this is for Fortune 500, and it's like going up against them. My thought was like my stomach dropped, was like my first reaction. But I knew what they were saying in the long term would not be the best for the people that I was serving. And it was really hit 50-50. And the interesting part, whenever I was talking about the health and well-being of the people, I could see that the group was afraid to go against what the leader said so much that they had the power. And that was something that was it was an interesting dynamic for me, just to see that aspect, but also learn that if that was that dynamic, is that something I actually want to keep myself in, if it's an insanity curse, going back and trying to do it over and over again, expecting a different result. So
Great point. That power has a very significant influence in our capacity to want to be independent thinkers, especially if in those environments when people try, they get their head cut off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What else have the experiences been?
I'll go.
Yeah, I see you're off mute. Wonderful.
Okay. I would like to talk about the process that I do with that. So I'm on a lot of boards too, and I try to take in both sides of the discussion, pros and cons, nuances, people who are speaking up, people who are not, all of that. And then I will journal, I will journal later, let it just flow all the way out. And then I will be able to see what pops up for me, that is truth for me, and I'm willing to share it. I don't hold onto it like it's the absolute truth, but I am willing to, in a way that is open to other people's feedback, but to share it, and so that I bring my truth to the group.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Kim. Mandy, you came off mute. Did you have?
Yeah. Hi. So I'm kind of along the same lines with Cam. I think I'm more of definitely a processor, especially if I'm in a group I'm not as familiar with, or maybe it's a new board that I'm on that I don't truly understand all the ins and outs, so I'm definitely not the first one to speak up. I think I'm a big question asker, but there are times that I'm the processor that later I'm like, okay, once I've had time to think through everything, maybe like, meeting number 2 or 3, that's when I'm more comfortable and confident in truth, sometimes what my thought process is. Now, if it's my team or whatnot, or people or calls I'm more familiar with, I think I'm much more confident, I guess is the word, because I have what I feel like is enough information to have, truly thoughtful, independent thoughts and opinions.
Great thing that you're bringing into the dynamic of independent thinking is the emotional state we're in. So if we feel confident, then our ability to want to share and be independent in our thinking, perhaps go against the grain or bring up something no one's thought of yet, or challenge the status quo, we're willing to do it. When we don't feel confident for whatever reason that might be, or we feel uncertain or unsafe, then we hesitate and we're not willing to risk as much because emotionally it's uncomfortable. And all of the thinking that follows those uncomfortable emotions is probably telling us, don't do that here. It might not be a good idea for you to do that here. Very significant pieces you're bringing in, Mandy. Thank you for that. And Cam, something that you brought in is, you said the word truth. I like to take time to be able to see what's been presented. And time is something we rarely have when we're coming together as a group of people. It's like, what's the decision, everybody? Let's go, let's go, let's go. And if you don't speak up in the 30 minutes we're having this meeting, you've lost your opportunity to do so. So what if you happen to be introverted or take a little extra time or want to journal and be objective? Truth is, we need to have these skills available when we need the skills. So if we happen to have a personality that is more introverted, takes a little bit more time, we have to learn buffering skills to that. So when the pace is fast, we can actually engage. And oftentimes in independent thinking, it is the difference between truth and perspective. So every time I'm in an interaction, I visualize a beach ball between me and everybody else. And around the beach ball are multiple colors. But when the beach ball is held in the center, I can only see yellow, orange, red. And other people are looking at blue, green, white. And until we actively work together to turn the ball so other people can see what we're looking at and we can see what other people are looking at, we only have partial information that's in the space between us. So independent thinking is a lot about our willingness to be able to share our beliefs, our thoughts, our ideas, our experiences, our input, everything, even our biases, our fears, everything, putting that information into the space so other people can say, oh, that's what you're looking at. Oh, that's what you're feeling. Oh, that's what you're worried about. Okay, now that I have all of that information, that's different than what I was thinking before. When people speak, we speak at about 125 words per minute. When we're listening at about 400 words per minute. So already a gap of a significant number of words from speaker to listener. That means when we're listening to someone speak, we're filling in that word gap with our own experiences. We're constructing the rest of the story based on the bits that they tell us. But the construction of our story is based on our experiences, not based on theirs. And so most of the time it's very inaccurate what we're filling in. And if we don't have very good impulse control, then we interrupt them and we add our stuff in and they're like, can you just let me finish? And once they finish, you go, oh, I shouldn't have said what I just said. And then the other piece of that equation is people are thinking at 900 words per minute. So if I'm thinking at 900, but I'm speaking at 125, it's going to take a lot of time for me to get all the things that I'm thinking out of my mouth. If I don't feel safe in the environment that I'm in, then I might only share 125 of the 900. You're only going to get 11% of what I'm thinking about. And in all likelihood, that 11% is the stuff I feel most safe to share in the moment. And based on your reaction or other people's reactions, I'll decide if it's safe enough for me to share more. So when we consider what is it like to be an independent thinker, it really is about remembering all of these variables are present when we are with other people. And so being mindful of things like the curse of being an independent thinker are labels that we're a contrarian, labels that we aren't a team player, labels that we simply need to go against the grain to be thought of as different or special. It's the way that we stand out. Oftentimes the labels around being independent thinkers are not positive ones. And as an example, this morning, my husband and I were having second breakfast because we're early risers. So we usually have 2 breakfasts before noon. And I asked him, I said, what comes to mind to you when you think the phrase independent thinker? And he paused for a minute to give it some thought. And he said, nothing good. I think about someone who doesn't want to be part of the group. I was like, oh, that's different because that's not what I'm thinking it is. So it's like, tell me more. Because if I just go off of that, then there's going to be a defense mechanism that wants to say some things, or an attack mechanism that wants to say, well, why would you only think the negative? Kelly, you came off mute. What would you like to
say? I have a question on that with your husband's reaction. And he didn't say man or woman, but is there a different perception for the independent thinking woman versus the independent thinking man? I mean, certainly in my own personal experience, as I've kind of come through my career, the independent thinkers that were male, and I was in the hospitality industry all of my career, that were males, where everybody would lean in just like, wow. And then a female would have this this independent thinking mindset. And oftentimes, depending on her EQ level, emotional intelligence level, it would be very interesting for me to watch kind of the room, watch how she was interacting, how she was bringing it in. Whereas if it was a man, different ball game. So I just was curious about your husband's reaction on male versus female.
It's just like earlier, the mention of power in this space.
Yeah.
So how and what biases of ours show up in every moment is a recognition of our emotional self-awareness. So I'm going to share my screen because I want to be able to share when we're discussing the skill of independence. I want to share the model of emotional intelligence. I want to be able to define for you what the skill of independence is and the supporting emotional intelligence skills that allow us to really flourish when it comes to being independent, whether it's in our thinking, our decision-making, and our emotional experiences. So this model that we're looking at is the EQ+EQ 2.0 model, in case you want to look it up, because I know sometimes when we're screen sharing, it's a pretty tiny image, so you can't really see it very well. But you'll probably be able to see the different colors, and these are the realms of emotional intelligence. So we have like a burgundy red color, an orange color, kind of a pea soup color, green, and then blue. And these are the 5 realms of emotional intelligence, and in each realm are 3 skills. So the first realm is self-perception. This is internally how we feel about ourselves. It is how realistic we are in perceiving how we show up in the world. It is knowing what our strengths and our weaknesses are and loving ourselves. It is understanding our emotional triggers and the thinking that we associate with those triggers, how our emotions show up, impact us, how we construct them, and how our emotional states impact other people. It's also the pursuit of meaning and fulfillment in life. So that's a lot packed into one realm of emotional intelligence. Now, independence as a skill set lives in the next realm, the self-expression realm, the orange one. And this is basically how we show up and express ourselves to the world itself. And the skills that are contained in here, yes, independence, but also assertiveness and emotional expression. So emotional expression is our constructive use of our emotions when we describe them to other people. And the best way I like to describe this is if you choose to express something like anger and it destroys or chips away at the harmony in your relationship, then you're not ready to express it. We only express things like anger when it's intended to strengthen the relationship. So you will have needed to understand your own anger and be managing it quite well in order to express it in a way that strengthens your relationship. Because I bet you and I can all think of instances when we expressed anger and we did not intend for it to help the relationship, nor did it help the relationship until maybe we apologized for the yelling, the swearing, the whatever we happen to do in our anger, name calling. Assertiveness, which is often confused with being aggressive or passive aggressive. I think this is now where we're referencing a little bit of Kelly's point around power, gender bias. So if we see a male expressing their thoughts, their opinions, their beliefs, we would say, oh, look at that, like strong, vocal, confident individual. We see a female doing it and we have perhaps different labels that we would attach to it. Oh, look at her, she's emotional and, you know, she can't control herself. Sometimes we hear derogatory terms that are used as well. But assertiveness is actually the expression of our thoughts, our feelings, our values, our emotions, our experiences in a non-offensive, non-destructive way. And so assertiveness is often confused with being aggressive or passive aggressive. So assertiveness means non-offensive, non-destructive. So it requires a certain amount of emotional management and articulation. You really have to be able to communicate clearly and know exactly what we're talking about. So here we come to independence in the self-expression realm as a skill set. It's defined as our ability to be self-directed and free from emotional dependency. Now, what does that mean? Basically, it means I can't let my feelings and my thoughts of this thing get in the way of making the right decision. So regardless of how I might feel about it, I have to check the facts. And when I problem solve, I have to make sure it is the best solution. So I have to consider other people, their thoughts, their experiences, the people factor in business. I have to consider the appropriate business factors that are necessary to consider here. And I have to pin my own emotions and feelings about the situation itself. And in leadership, that can be very, very hard to do because we have skills like empathy, where we feel how other people are feeling. And we realize that our decision might impact people in a way that might not be beneficial to them as an individual, even though the solution is best for the greater good. We may not like the decision ourselves because it means we have to change a process that we have mastered already. And now we're going to have to learn something new and start from the bottom again. So on the left, I've highlighted that the 3 important skills that support independence are our emotional self-awareness. We have to be aware of which emotions are showing up that are driving us towards doing something like making a decision or solving a problem or speaking up, and the emotions that show up that prevent us from doing those. And our ability to manage those emotions like fear, uncertainty, excitement even, is essential so that we don't, 2, tarnish relationships, which is why interpersonal relationships is such an important component for our independent thinking. Is independent doesn't mean by ourselves. In leadership, sometimes it's like the buck stops here. So when as independent thinker or using the skill of independence, I'm the one who makes the final decision if I'm the leader. But it doesn't mean that I haven't asked other people their opinions, what they would do in this situation, what would work from them, what they're concerned about. I need all of the information. I need to turn the beach ball. I need everything in the pool, everyone's experiences, values, concepts, our vision, our goals as a company. I need everything in the pool so I could look at all of this information and make a decision. If I'm only using my executive team's information, my own experience, my decision-making is going to fall short. And this is where the problem-solving component shows up. In emotional intelligence, problem-solving is all about the ability to find solutions when emotions are involved. And if we can't manage our emotional state, then our problem-solving skills are usually not very good because intellectually we're foggy. In certain emotional states, our intellect or our IQ is less accessible. Ever notice when you're frustrated, aggravated, annoyed, how difficult it is for your intellect to be sharp? Okay, so now that we've had a really good sort of definition of what is independence, I'm going to launch this poll so that you can assess your current skill set from 1 to 10 in using the skill of independence. Statistically, in emotional intelligence assessments, women will, this is a paintbrush generalization, women often underestimate their skill set and men often overestimate their skill set. And so critically for leaders, we do 360 evaluations of emotional intelligence. So we evaluate ourselves and then we ask other people to evaluate us. And generally we go, "Ooh, that was a blind spot." So these are our results. The majority of us here today are thinking somewhere between 5 and 8. I got some skills, got some room to grow. And I would probably anticipate the space in which we need to grow is probably directed to paying attention to the emotion we're in, paying attention to the emotion that's driving what we're doing or what we're not doing. And when we learn to manage that emotion by debating the thinking that's in our head, then what ends up happening is we learn how to find the things we want to say that's appropriate to the situation and the time we need to say it. Okay, I'm going to stop talking again and open up to things that have been coming up for you, questions that you have so far. It's a great time to be able to engage in very specific examples of things that you're experiencing and how you can get better at them, develop them, solve them. So just remember to come off mute.
So I'll jump in. My personality type naturally is to be extroverted, very comfortable with my intuition, and somewhat impatient. So all those things, you know, I can easily come across as an independent thinker who kind of rides over everyone else in the group. And I really have to step back and make myself listen and build consensus as a leader. You know, not even if we end up coming out with the same answer or outcome, it's the process that's so important. And for me, it's been a journey to step back and understand that, you know, wow, it is so much better when, you know, when I am more inclusive and bring diverse thoughts, you know, to the table, instead of feeling like I have to solve the problems, answer the problems, lead, do it all. And sometimes that means stepping back and letting people come to their own conclusions, and then, you know, waiting as a leader, waiting to let them make their conclusions so that they're not afraid to, you know, creating a safe space for my team to be able to come up with their own answers instead of me being the first to speak, and then kind of setting the tone for how it should go. So I know that's kind of a lot, but it's a journey. It's not, it hasn't been easy.
Tremendously valuable, Julie, because you're admitting you have personality traits that get in the way of you doing some things effectively if you're not mindful of them. So our personality traits have edges, and we have to learn how to ride those edges, because sometimes speaking first is necessary as a leader. You just got to know when that time is. As much as you have to know, this is not a time for me to speak first, because if I do, no one else will share anything. And so in this moment, I'm going to use my impulse control, and I'm just going to put the idea of what we're talking about out there, and I'm just going to like fade into the background, and I'll call on other people. Or maybe before the meeting, I'm going to ask other people to come with their ideas. I'm going to ask certain people to share first. And coaching is a necessary skill set in leadership to be successful. This is how you draw out of other people where you know that they have strengths. So when we're in a group and we're leading that group, calling on people, knowing what they're really good at, to share those elements, instead of just calling them and saying, what do you have to share? Like in this environment, I don't know any of you. So I'm like, I'm hoping that you share your thoughts and ideas. But when you're working with your team, you need to know, this is why interpersonal relationships is so valuable. You need to know how every person operates in their strengths and weaknesses. So in those environments, you can call specifically on them to share around their strengths. And that contribution elevates confidence because they're in a space of competence. So their confidence goes up. And as the meeting progresses, what ends up happening is people feel safe because they shared something that allows them to be competent and confident. And in that space, when it's received well, it feels safe. So then they're willing to risk a little bit more. I'm going to share something that I have never shared before. I've never said this out loud before. No one would ever expect me to think this way about this because it's from another department. And now, because as Julie stated, you've created the space for people to say, it's okay to say what you need to say here. New ideas, independent thinking begins to happen. As leaders, the second thing that is crucial in these environments is, as soon as someone displays a toxic behavior, you have to like nip it in the bud. As soon as someone bullies someone else, laughs at an idea, eye rolls, we have to stop that behavior in its tracks, because that's the behavior that bleeds quickly into independent thinking, innovation, creativity, and motivation drops fast and everyone's mouth goes boop, and the meeting's over.
I love that. It makes me think while hearing Julie, and it was because I'm like that as well. And my question is, how does ego and impatience come from that? Like, what can you do? Because I know sometimes I want to hold my ego back, but I know what my strengths are. But then it's like, what advice would you give to people that want to be independent thinkers? Because sometimes whenever you do come out, it is having that risky, that talk, but still having patience as a leader to give that time for everybody else to have their time.
Yeah, great question. So ego, well, if we define ego first, is a false sense of self. Anytime we feel inferior to someone or superior to someone, our ego is active. And so if we can simply begin to, like, an active exercise in emotional intelligence is watching yourself like a hawk. So if you were simply curious about paying attention to your ego for a week, simply pay attention to when you feel inferior to someone or superior to someone. And then you'll notice, oh my God, my ego shows up all the time. And it's true. When you start to pay attention, you'll be like, wow, it showed up while I was watching a commercial of people eating McDonald's. I'm a healthy person and a runner. So when, commercials around McDonald's come up, I'm like, oh my God, I would never eat that stuff. And that's my ego being superior to other people who choose to eat McDonald's. Totally. So awareness of, just like awareness of biases that show up, which are also expressions of our ego as well, can start to heighten the associations that we tag to different things. And as soon as we're aware of them, we can do something about them. When we're not aware of them, then they operate, they direct our behaviors and our impact. And awareness leads to management strategies. So if the first thing you think of, I'm aware there's my ego, and what my ego wants to do is be superior and be right and give some answers and contribute so I look like a leader, you can say, what's the counterbalancing emotional intelligence skill to that? Is empathy, understanding other people's perspectives and asking questions. So just being curious. So instead, to counterbalance this impatience ego drive, I'm just going to get curious, and I'm going to ask some questions, and I'm going to ask someone to expand on a thought and idea. And when I do that, that curiosity feeds my own idea making. What it also does is it lets other people go, wow, that was a really good question. And so their trust and esteem in you as in a leader elevates, because they see how you pull things out of other people to create the space that everybody wants to be a part of, whether or not the stuff comes out of your mouth, because ultimately you're the one who's going to make the final decision anyways. And they're going to need to know when you make that final decision, how you got to that decision, during which you're going to mention, I considered this, and this, which is everything everybody said here. I also include these things, which are the things that I know are operating in the business. And this is how I came to that decision. I hope that helps.
Amen to that one.
Amen to that one, yeah. Next share, contribution.
Well, I'll kind of back, adding to Emily's question, rather than ego popping up, is more of like registering emotions. So, because in this emotional intelligence that we're talking about, often emotions stir up, like you say, and cloud your logical thinking, but they're also but indicators for how we should move forward. Sometimes like anger is a trigger for fear or inferiority or trauma or something like that, and trying to tell you like, maybe you should hold back, or maybe you shouldn't do this. Like there's some emotions that are there as like supposed to be helpful. It's the issue is when we kind of let them take over in overdrive, which is similar to like a presentation that Emily has given in the past, which is related to ego, like them being in the driver's seat. So in a space where you are a leader, or you are contributing, we'll say a meeting for an example, and you know that an emotion has popped up, and it's not necessarily ego, but it's like you're feeling one type of way and you haven't quite understood that. what are some tools to kind of help manage to know how to make the next step, I guess, when you're also trying to consider the thoughts and feelings of other people, especially if it is in an emotional space. Oh, perfect.
Yeah, great. That's a great series of questions, like painting a really vivid picture here, because oftentimes when we're with other people, we have our emotions and other people's emotions in the space. And we're not all constructing the same emotion, and we're not all responding to our emotions in the same way. Because emotions don't have fingerprints. Anger does not look the same for you as it does for me, and we don't construct them the same way. Although we often operate in interpreting other people's emotions to mean the same as ours and to attach similar thinking, although it's opposite thinking. Like when I'm angry, I do this because I'm trying to do my best for other people. Oh, but when that person is angry and doing that, they're doing that because they're an asshole. So we make this fundamental attribution error in blaming other people's emotional behavior on their worst case. And we do this thing where we blame ours on our best intentions. And so something that I would recommend as far as exercises goes, we have to do the pen to paper work in our emotional intelligence development. And pen to paper work is basically, you got to trace how you learn to construct your emotions and everything you attach to an emotional experience. When we're trying to do our emotional management in the moment and we haven't done this pen to paper work, it's very hard for us to do a good job in the moment of reserving our emotions from driving the behavior. Every single time, I think the first practice is begin to catch yourself labeling your emotions as good or bad. So emotions are just emotions. They're intended to inform what's happening in the moment for you. So it's your perspective. Remember, it's not everyone else's perspective, just yours. So if we happen to be in a red-based emotion, this chart that I'm showing you comes from Mark Brackett, Permission to Feel. So if you wanted to grab it, you can grab it off the internet and print it and have it available. So if you're feeling red-based emotions, which are in the anger zone, the fear zone, these are often unpleasant and of high energy. What helps us immediately in the moment is to breathe. So the first thing that happens when we get emotionally charged up with uncomfortable, high energetic emotions is our breathing shifts. It gets shallower. Sometimes we hold it. And that physical manifestation means that we will continue to escalate in that emotion unless we change something. And so the first easy thing for us to do is to take a deep breath. Count to 10. I know it sounds ridiculous, but there's a reason why this is tip number 1 in all anger management classes is breathe and count to 10. It's because it works, and we have to calm our nervous system, both our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system that's on high alert in these high energetic, uncomfortable emotions. And so what you will notice in breathing is you're giving yourself the space between emotion and response. And in this space is where we get to do our thinking. But what ends up happening in really high, unpleasant emotions is we have the feeling and we bump up a response right to it because we want to get rid of how we feel. We don't like this. This is uncomfortable for us. And what we do is sometimes go silent or go violent. We swing the pendulum really far. The goal with the breath and counting is to bring the pendulum back to the center. So you're ultimately just trying to calm yourself down so you can think more logically. Now, what if you're in a different emotional state? Any emotional state, whether you are red, blue, yellow, or green, is essentially moving ourselves from what is neutral for us. In other words, you can just call it well-being. So what is your sort of well-being rhythm where you're firing on all cylinders, getting to know yourself really well? And then different emotional experiences will move you in the pendulum. The faster you can recognize you're moving in the pendulum, the faster you can deploy a strategy like a deep breath and bring yourself back. The longer it takes you to notice and the pendulum swings away, the more strategies you need to bring yourself back to neutral or well-being. So a pen to paper exercise that can be done to heighten your emotional self-awareness is keep track throughout the day, every hour on the hour. Just check in. You could set an alarm on your phone and just tick in the box what emotions you're experiencing. And what you'll notice after a week is you'll notice you have a theme, that you experience certain emotions more often than others. Then you can look back at your week and be able to figure out why. What's triggering me? What are the things I'm doing that's triggering? And what are the things I'm not doing? So if we aren't doing our hobbies, if we're not connected with people we love, if we're not in meaning and fulfillment in our life, we experience a lot of unwell emotions. And simply doing things like exercising, sleeping well, eating right, meditating, journaling, spending time with people we love is like wearing well-being armor. So when someone does something minor at work that is a little annoying, we're like, oh yeah, that's just Bob. He does those things every once in a while. And I've got my well-being armor on. So I might notice the restlessness from it, and I might notice a little spike in my emotions, but I take a deep breath and I reality test and I'm like, yeah, that's Bob. He does those kinds of things. All I have to do is talk to him about it and we're good. This practice, pen to paper, of watching ourselves and how we think about things and what we associate to them, and just practicing breathing can be night and day change. But the other thing I mentioned is stacking yourself with good armor. So the pillars of well-being in our emotional wellness: sleep, exercise, nutrition, connection with people we love, engaging in our hobbies, journaling, mindfulness, meditation. Those are all awesome pillars to just stack emotions of well-being. So less things irritate us, basically. That's a great question, Carolyn.
I have another question. So it makes me think too at first I always thought that you can only have like one emotion at a time, but talk about multiple emotions, because I can be angry and happy at the same, like my kids went back to school. I'm excited, but I'm sad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's both types. So what if you're a green and a blue, or a yellow and a red, like you're both of them? Talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Because the truth is we're all over the place with our emotions. Yeah, we're never experiencing one at the same time. At the same time, we're complex individuals because our brains are complex. And that's where we construct our emotions, is in our brain, and not just one part of our brain. All parts of our brain are constructing emotions all the time. So something you mentioned, Emily, about how we construct emotions is what we're thinking about. And we are naturally, based on our life experiences, stuck in thinking patterns. And the way to shift our emotions about things is we have to disrupt our thinking patterns. So oftentimes I think of our emotional experiences like a spiral. And so at the top of the spiral is the trigger. Something happened. Walked into the kitchen and there's like a dish left on the counter. And so what do I feel? Normally it's a feeling first. You go, agitated. You can probably all go, yep, irritated. Or some of you are like, I don't give a shit. Because it doesn't matter to me if there's, but for me, I'm like, agitated. And then the thinking begins. Who left that on the table? Who left that on the counter? Did they do it on purpose? Probably did it on purpose. Oh, well, maybe they didn't. Maybe it was just that they were in a rush. And are they thinking, I'm going to clean it up? Well, I'm not going to clean it up. Why do I always have to do everything in the house? And you just see the spiral starting to collect different emotions through that. At first, I feel like irritated, and then I get livid, and then I'm like disheartened. I'm the only one who cleans up. Like, oh my goodness. So the spiral is an emotion. Then there's thinking, which drives emotions, which drives different thinking, which drives emotions and more thinking. And then we're caught in this spiral, and eventually we'll reach a hijack point where all of this tips us over. And now we do this behavior that we regret, we feel bad about, we beat ourselves up about, we blame other people for, we shame ourselves for. So emotional intelligence is going, I already know what all my triggers are. Dishes on the counter. It's a trigger for me. So I've done the pen to paper work of why. What do I associate to that? What have I learned about dishes on the counter? What does it say about me, say about other people? Look at all these beliefs that show up just about a dish. And then in that work is like, is any of this true? Is any of the stuff I think about it true? No, it's just my perspective. That's all. It's not the truth. And so now when I see dishes, what do you think's happening? I'm like, I've reconditioned myself to go, I like doing dishes. So I'm like, excellent. Let's get this cleaned up. I feel awesome when I clean and do chores. I'm like, someone was just helping me to experience a little bit of joy. Wonderful. Now, as you recognize all of your triggers and start to follow the spiral and what ends up happening to you, you can start to see triggers coming. So, certain people, certain situations, certain circumstances trigger you, then you could see them in your calendar. Oh my God, Bob, 4 times this week, and he's a trigger for me 4 times. So what am I going to do? Well, before I meet with Bob, I'm going to send him an email, and I'm going to prompt him on things that normally irritate me. I'm going to have a quick call with Beth, because generally Beth and I argue in meetings because we're on opposite sides of the fence. And I'm just going to give her a quick call and ask her what her goals and objectives are for the meeting. I'm going to share mine. We're going to try to come to some sort of harmony in what we're looking to achieve. That'll absolutely help when we're in the meeting, that we're not at each other like this in front of other people. So we start to do things proactively to manage our triggers. And then in the moment when, we're like, ooh, I could feel that. We've done so much work with our own triggers that in the moment of new ones, we don't swing the pendulum so far. We swing it a little bit, and we know how to manage that emotion better. And so less and less things will throw us for a loop. Less and less things will disrupt us. This process of developing your emotional self-awareness and management and emotional intelligence is not like, I've done it for 6 weeks, I'm good. Years, plural. I started when I was 26, I'm 48. I continually work on it and flex those muscles. I would say after a good decade, I had some pretty solid skills, and it's difficult to disrupt me from my norm. But every once in a while, something or someone comes along, and oftentimes it's very much associated with, I didn't sleep well. I haven't eaten in a little bit. I'm fatigued. I didn't resolve or have a conversation, and so I've let current stress build up. And so like this next little thing that comes in, they're getting the blow up. So it's a little bit more that I didn't take care of myself and notice things that were irritating me and resolve them. It's very seldom that now it's something is such a big deal that it throws me for a loop. It's more so I didn't pay attention to the subtle signals and resolve them, and they built up enough that the next thing flipped me off.
I was going to add something to that, Teresa.
Mm-hmm.
The other kind of trigger awareness piece as well is in emergency situations, or when things are super heightened, because the preparation when something's going to trigger you is brilliant, because it really helps prep you when it's going to happen. But when things happen, smack you upside the head in that moment, that's when that practice, the rehearsal, really strengthening your EQ skills comes in so handy. And I'll try to be as brief as possible, but aloha everybody. I'm the newest to I don't know if I'm the newest, but I'm actually sitting in Waikiki right now on this call. But I moved to Chattanooga recently, so I go back and forth between Hawaii and here. But my most recent leadership role was overseeing several hotels, and it's during the pandemic and COVID. And I know my unconscious motivators. I'm self-reliant and independent, and I love goal achievement. So those are the things I have to be extremely heightened awareness. It's worked for me in a great way. And when things happen, I have to really watch it, because I want to bulldoze everybody and make sure everybody's safe, everybody's aligned, everybody's, paddling the canoe in the same direction. And the most recent situation I had, we had all of our protocols at the hotel, all of our safety, everything outlined. All the team members at our properties knew exactly what they were supposed to do. And then we had a COVID case in the property, and we needed to get that guest out of the 18th floor, down to the lobby, out to an ambulance to take them out of the property and make sure that none of the employees were exposed and no other guests. And so the books and all the, all the details we had aligned did not cover this particular situation. And it was in the moment. And so, for me, I typically just go, okay, I know what to do. I'm just going to tell everybody what to do. But what it's like these moments of step back, gather as many of your team as you possibly can in this moment. And let's get the experts. Let's get our bell, the bell person that handles this each and every day. How do we get this person in the most private way from point A to point B? We gathered a very small, it was 6 people. They were all of our frontline hourly team members. What are we going to do? And I'm just like, what are we going to do? I'm asking them, and they're kind of looking at me like, you're the general manager. You tell us what to do. And I go, no. What are we going to do? Let's walk through this. And everybody was in it. If we do this, and it was fast, it was quick, and everybody participated. And I will tell you, it was and I've been in this industry a long time, but as a leader, and I felt like, okay, I'm so, I'm just all over this. My immediate was to bulldoze and get it happen. And I said, nope, step back. Let's bring everybody in. And it was so great. And everybody was safe, and we did all the right things, and the guest was safe. And it really, it's that moment, it's those triggers in the moment that you have to really have an incredibly heightened sense, especially with safety and security, right? It's like, then you really need to put it on overdrive. So for me, that was a great positive learning experience in a very seasoned leader that I said, okay, I'm good. And we moved on. But it's those emergency situations that can times really trip you up.
Yeah, really great example, Kelly. Thank you so much for that. It really highlights the necessity of doing the work behind the curtains so that when we're in those situations, we've got the skills to flex. You're also highlighting that we don't always get it right straight out of the gates, but we can always course correct. We can always get a minute in and catch ourselves and go, whoa, stop that. Take a right-hand turn and course correct. So I want to wrap up with this. Independence and being an independent thinker is oftentimes asking yourself 2 questions. 1, should I express myself? And then if you do, there comes a point where you're asking yourself, should I express myself more? And that tipping point is when there's disagreement. So I've expressed myself, and then there's disagreement. No, we don't think so. That's not going to work. Sometimes our emotional inclination is to argue, defend ourselves, attack their information. And that's driven by emotions that are toxic, because there are emotions that are me emotions. I want to win. I'm right. So that is a lot driven by our ego, a lot driven by emotions of, what if I'm not good enough? So a lot of fear-based emotions. And the way we disrupt that to be an independent thinker is we get curious. So instead of arguing, defending, attacking, you can feel maybe the lump in your throat or the fire in your belly or your face get hot and you're ready to do it. And instead, you just take a breath, look up, because that indicates to other people we're thinking. So it usually keeps other people quiet for just a second. Take a breath, look up, and simply say the words, tell me more. 3 simple words, which sometimes might take the other people by surprise, like, oh. But what you're encouraging is get more of what you're thinking out of your head. And so they'll tell you a little bit more. And then your goal is to ask every question: how, when, where, who, what. And then finally, why. Don't start with why, it's too emotionally triggering for people, but you can close with it. Because then after that exploration and you ask yourself the question, should I express myself more? You may be in a position where when you answer that question, it's not emotionally answered. You're much more objective and going, yes, now is a good time for me to ask a few more things, state a few more things, engage in a bit more dialogue. Or now it might be like, nothing more for me to say. I need to take it away and make a decision. And we thank our contributors. Emotional intelligence and using these skills has a lot to do with how we engage with people. Because it turns out if we rub people the wrong way, no one wants to stick around to find out how smart we are or what ideas we have anyways. So our emotional intelligence skills is the missing link in the equation of how do I get people to stick around and share what they're thinking about? So it is why I've created the IQ plus EQ is TQ. Is we've worked many years of our life on our intellect. I mean, from the time we came out of the womb, people are trying to teach us how to talk and figure things out and associate meaning to stuff. And then we go into school and we're stack ranked against other kids and you got a gold star, you didn't get a gold star. Oh my God, I'm not smart enough. And for years, we're assessed on our intellect. And then we get into the workplace and people are like, I don't want that person on my team, but they're so smart. Doesn't matter. I don't like working with them. And the missing equation is the EQ. Because without it, we drive people away from us. We don't work well with people. We're not creative. We're not motivated. We don't feel well. We don't talk nicely. We don't do all of these things that are really important to the social dynamic that we are as human beings. So when we put the equation together, our talent, our capacity to use our talent and our potential goes up. And yes, TQ stands for my name because this is the work that I do, but it also nicely represents hitting our potential. I'm going to throw up one more poll, and I also just want to leave this here that invite everyone to get in touch. If you're interested in more your own emotional intelligence development, perhaps you could check out my Spark program that's on my website. If you want a discovery call to talk about your leadership excellence, emotional intelligence in your organization, feel free to email me and we can set that up. Follow me on LinkedIn, grab my YouTube page. On YouTube, just type in Teresa Quinlan and then you'll get like the 300 and subscribe to the channel. There's a lot of videos on emotional intelligence. I've been building them for 2 years, usually 3 or 4 a week. So it's a lot of video clips. And here comes our last poll. This one is all about, have you learned some things you think you'll be able to take with you to improve your success in being an independent thinker? And I realize sometimes this is hard to answer straight out of the gates because although everyone's like, yes, amazing. Let me just give it like 3 more seconds because 15 of 17 have responded. Here's the interesting thing. You don't become more emotionally intelligent by coming to a speaking event on emotional intelligence. You have to put the stuff into play. You got to practice it. That's how we develop our actual emotional intelligence skills. I appreciate all of your great questions and your engagement. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I'm just going to pass over the controls here to Shariah. She's going to take us to the end.
All right. Well, just wanted to kind of set the stage. Did anybody have any questions or final thoughts that you wanted to share with the group? We've got a couple minutes.
Thank you, Teresa. I really enjoyed your presentation today and everybody's input as well. I think that this was a really good discussion on being able to kind of be inclusive and move forward through inclusivity of awareness, essentially, and how that can create stronger teams.
Absolutely. Yeah. I loved what was shared earlier on about creating kind of just a safe place for our teams to become the independent thinkers, and then also just the awareness of our biases and emotions as they directly, or as they do direct our behaviors as leaders. So yeah, I definitely took a lot of that to heart. I'm gonna have to do the pen to paper exercise that you spoke about. So yeah, we have some really great stuff that you shared. So thank you so much for sharing the expertise with us today. And just thank you everyone who took the time to join us today. Just a quick note, our next program is gonna be May 4th. We're gonna dive into the mastery of reflection. So mark your calendars for that lunch meeting. And as always, I put in the chat here, we'd love to hear your feedback. So I'll be sending out a brief survey. So just let us know how we can improve our programming. And of course, we're going to archive this content online as well. So I'll extend those links following this.